Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take your current understanding of a complex topic, put a flashlight on the footnotes, and show you exactly where the cutting edge of science is rewriting the textbooks.
And today we are really getting into one of those topics.
We are strapping in for the long haul. We're talking about the science of seasonal heterothermy, better known to most of us as hibernation.
And if your mental image of hibernation is still that classic cartoon squirrel simply taking a 5-month nap, prepare for a serious paradigm shift. We're deep diving into a physiological state that is far more radical and far more complex than simple sleep. It's an active metabolic suppression that fundamentally changes the rules of biology.
In environments you'd least expect, too.
Often, yes.
Okay, so let's unpack this immediately. The traditional cozy image of hibernation is all based on winter, deep cold, and a body temperature plummeting close to freezing. But our sources, the articles and research you brought to the table, they suggest we need a new definition. What is the fundamental mechanism we're really talking about here?
At its core, hibernation is just this elegant, radical energy conservation strategy. It's a state of minimal activity and metabolic reduction.
Characterized by what exactly?
Well, you're looking at low body temperature, dramatically slowed heart and breathing rates, and just an overall depression of the metabolic rate. The function is simple. Survive.
Survive when food runs out.
Exactly. Survive when environmental conditions. And that's usually defined by resource scarcity, not just cold make life unsustainable.
And the crucial distinction here is moving away from temperature as the sole marker and really focusing on the underlying engineering.
Precisely. The field has redefined the term based on active metabolic suppression, not necessarily the absolute drop in body temperature.
Okay, that's the key pivot.
It is. And it allows us to view hibernation as a continuum. You have short daily torpor, where a hummingbird might dip its metabolism overnight, all the way up to the months-long shutdowns we see in bears and ground squirrels.
So they're all using a similar toolkit.
They're all utilizing similar fundamental pathways to, turn down the biological thermostat.
It's the difference between tapping the brakes and turning off the engine entirely. An endothermic animal, one that generates its own heat, actively decides to lower its energy expenditure.
Yes. It sacrifices its hard-won ability to maintain a steady, high internal temperature.
Because the energy cost of finding food is just too high.
That's the metabolic commitment. They are temporarily disabling their costly endothermy. Depending on the species, this physiological shutdown can last from just hours to over half a year.
And the preparation is legendary. I mean, they either become hyperphagic.
Right, eating vast amounts to store fat.
Or they meticulously cache massive amounts of food for, periodic use.
And some, like female black bears, are hibernating while gestating. That alone suggests an almost impossible level of physiological control.
It's mind-boggling. They're fueling new life purely through stored resources, maintaining a warm core for the cubs, and still losing maybe 15 to 27% of their body mass by the time they emerge.
It is a phenomenal balancing act.
Right.
It requires the body to perfectly regulate resource allocation, ensuring that the necessary warmth and nutrients reach the fetus, while the rest of the body is in this deep shutdown.
So our mission today, then, is to explore this complex spectrum, to understand the surprising technical distinctions that separate these deep hibernators.
And to look at the rule-breaking cases.
The bears and the tropical lemurs, yeah. The ones that force science to abandon the old temperature rules.
And finally, look at how researchers are racing to steal these physiological secrets to induce hibernation in humans.
For trauma medicine and deep space exploration, a huge topic.
It really is. So to start, we have to categorize these champions of metabolic economy. Let's talk about the difference between being programmed to hibernate and choosing to hibernate.
Let's do it. The two main camps in mammals, obligate versus facultative.
Obligate hibernators are the ones who adhere to a strict internal schedule. They enter the hibernation state spontaneously, annually, often regardless of external factors like temperature or food access.
So it's a clock. An internal biological clock just triggers the shutdown.
It does. These are your traditional deep hibernators. Many ground squirrels, European hedgehogs, marmots.
And this is the state where the body temperature really plummets, right? Getting within a degree or two of the ambient temperature of their burrow. It's a near-death state.
It is. And this is where the mystery really deepens. The periodic euthermic arousals.
The what now?
Despite the immense energy saving of being cold, obligate hibernators frequently wake up. They restore their normal high body temperature, that's thermy, for 12 to 24 hours before plunging back into torpor.
Okay, I have to challenge this, just based on the energy equation. If the whole point is conservation, why would evolution design a system that requires the animal to spend, what, maybe 80% of its entire hibernation energy budget just warming up and cooling down over and over?
It seems wildly inefficient.
It does.
And that is the precise question that has vexed biologists for decades.
Yeah.
We have multiple competing hypotheses. One major theory suggests it's about restoring homeostatic imbalances. Perhaps certain toxins or metabolic byproducts build up in the cold state, and they need a full-body warm-up to clear them out.
Like rebooting a computer that's gotten bogged down.
Exactly. Another extremely compelling hypothesis, and this is supported by research on the Arctic ground squirrel, is the sleep debt theory.
A sleep debt? While they're hibernating.
Right. During the cold state, they're metabolically suppressed, but they aren't achieving adequate restorative sleep. So when they warm up, they exhibit increased slow-wave activity, the deep, restorative part of non-REM sleep.
So they're waking up to sleep better.
It suggests they're using the arousal period to catch up on crucial sleep they missed while they were cold. It's a powerful testament to the fundamental importance of sleep.
That's amazing.
It is. And crucially, there's also the immune system hypothesis. Immune function, especially your T-cell response, it requires a high body temperature to operate effectively. So it's thought that these periodic arousals are necessary to, patrol the system, launch an effective immune response, and repair any damage before going back into that metabolically vulnerable cold state.
So it's a complex trade-off. You spend massive energy now to prevent a catastrophic system's failure later.
Exactly. And speaking of catastrophe avoidance, the Arctic ground squirrel is the king of extreme hibernation. Its physiological feat of freeze avoidance is just astounding.
This is the animal that sustains sub-zero temperatures in its core. How is that even possible without lethal ice crystals forming?
This is truly breathtaking level of biological control. This squirrel can maintain abdominal temperatures as low as minus 2.9 degrees Celsius.
That's 26.8 degrees Fahrenheit.
And sustain that for over 3 weeks at a time. And the sources highlight they avoid freezing solid through highly localized thermal regulation.
So they're creating thermal zones within their own body.
Exactly. They maintain the temperatures in their head and neck regions strategically at 0 degrees Celsius or above. They achieve this using selective vasoconstriction and vasodilation, essentially managing blood flow to create a thermal gradient.
So the head, the brain, is protected from the worst of the cold, while the rest of the body can hover below freezing.
It's an active process of freeze avoidance rather than freeze tolerance. They are manipulating their own thermodynamics to prevent ice formation entirely.
That is just a remarkable evolutionary response. Okay, let's flip to the other end of the spectrum. Facultative hibernation. If obligate hibernators are on a strict schedule, what drives these guys?
Facultative hibernators are your crisis managers. They only enter that deep torpor state when they're stressed, usually by the confluence of severe cold and food deprivation. They lack that spontaneous annual internal trigger.
They're just responding to immediate hardship.
Yeah.
And the chipmunk is the perfect example here, right? If it has enough food stashed away and the winter isn't too bad, it might just sleep for a long time without ever truly entering that radical metabolic suppression.
That's the key distinction. It might just be slowing down a bit, but that deeper state is only initiated when the energy balance calculation tips decisively against survival.
When it hits the emergency shutdown button.
Right. And we see this evolutionary divergence even in close cousins, which really helps clarify the definitions.
Oh, give us the comparative example.
So consider prairie dogs. The white-tailed prairie dog is an obligate hibernator. It's programmed annually for the deep state, regardless of food stores.
Okay.
But the closely related black-tailed prairie dog is purely facultative. It might experience torpor, but it only initiates a sustained, deep metabolic shutdown if it is severely cold-stressed and facing starvation.
Wow. Two species, neighbors, using entirely different survival strategies.
Driven by different evolutionary pressures.
That distinction, programmed versus reactive, gives us the perfect foundation for discussing the rule breakers. Because the next two case studies force the entire scientific community to rethink what hibernation actually is. Let's talk about bears.
For decades, the black bear and the brown bear were excluded from the true hibernator club.
Why? I mean, it's a huge animal that sleeps through winter. That sounds like the definition of hibernation to me.
The skepticism was entirely based on that outdated temperature criterion. In obligate rodents, the body temperature drops by, 32 degrees Celsius or more.
Yeah, a huge drop.
A huge drop. Bears, however, only experience a modest decline, typically 3 to 5 degrees Celsius. They stay relatively warm, hovering around 30 to 34 degrees. So early researchers argued they were just in a state of deep winter torpor, not a true physiological shutdown.
So the community missed the forest for the trees. They were looking at the thermometer instead of the metabolic rate.
Precisely. And that theory was decisively refuted by research in 2011 and 2016. Scientists realized that while the temperature drop wasn't dramatic, the active metabolic suppression was absolutely profound.
How profound?
They were actively reducing their energy expenditure by about 75% compared to their summer resting rate. This active regulated hypometabolism became the new defining characteristic.
And the physiological achievements that go with this. They're like biological miracles. They solve problems that plague humans in space or in bed rest.
They truly become self-sustaining recycling units. Take nitrogen waste. If a human stopped urinating for months, toxic urea would build up and be lethal.
Right.
Bears, however, recycle their proteins in urea. They effectively shut down the urination process for months, converting urea back into usable amino acids.
I mean, how do they do that? Is it a liver function?
It's complex. It likely involves specific liver enzymes and, perhaps most fascinatingly, specialized gut bacteria that aid in breaking down and recycling those nitrogen compounds.
So this recycling process, it prevents the toxic waste buildup and it fuels the synthesis of new amino acids.
Which is key to preventing the massive muscle atrophy that should occur from long-term inactivity. They aren't just passively surviving, they are actively maintaining their structural integrity.
And bone loss too, right? Osteoporosis, they avoid that completely.
Entirely circumvented. A human bedridden for months suffers severe demineralization. Bears maintain bone density. Research has shown their blood serum actually inhibits the activity of osteoclasts, the cells responsible for dissolving bone tissue while they're hibernating.
So they're turning off the demolition crew for their own skeleton.
It's genetic regulation at a staggering level. They're strategically increasing essential amino acids in muscle tissue and regulating a specific suite of genes to limit muscle degradation. It's total internal homeostasis.
An engineering marvel. Now, that 2016 study on brown bears also gave us key insights into the triggers. How do they know when to start and when to finish?
That study tracked 14 brown bears over 3 winters, and it gave us the first clear chronology. The start of the denning period is driven by environmental cues, snow arrival, and the ambient temp dropping to around 0 Celsius.
Okay, so the environment kicks it off.
But, and this is key, the physiological slowdown, the drop in heart rate and metabolic rate, actually starts several weeks before they physically enter the den.
So the body anticipates the need for hibernation before the external conditions force the issue.
Correct. But the end of hibernation is purely physiological. Their body temperature starts rising 2 full months before they physically leave the den, completely independent of external cues.
2 months.
2 months. They're relying on an internal temperature threshold and a hormonal cascade to initiate arousal. They only finally emerge once the outside temperature exceeds their lower critical temperature.
So the bear is the living proof that you can achieve true hibernation, profound metabolic suppression without that radical temperature drop.
Which forced the scientific definition to pivot, a powerful redefinition.
Now, let's pivot from the cold, massive bear to the warm, tiny primate, the fat-tailed dwarf lemur. Before this discovery, the common wisdom was absolute. You needed a cold climate to hibernate.
And that discovery completely demolished that rule. The fat-tailed dwarf lemur is a tropical mammal, a primate, that hibernates in tree holes for up to 7 months of the year.
This is the real aha moment of the deep dive. If Madagascar winter temperatures can sometimes climb past 30 degrees Celsius, that's 86 Fahrenheit, then hibernation is not about escaping the cold. What's it about?
It's purely about resource scarcity. The Malagasy winter is the dry season. Food and water become extremely hard to find. The energy cost of actively foraging in a lean tropical dry season outweighs the energy cost of shutting down for half the year.
So they conserve energy by avoiding starvation, not avoiding freezing.
Precisely. And this lemur introduces another fascinating concept, passive hibernation.
What do you mean by passive?
Well, because the lemurs choose tree holes, the insulation quality varies wildly. If the hole is poorly insulated, the lemur's body temperature will passively follow the ambient temperature, sometimes climbing quite high during a midday spike.
So the lemur is passively fluctuating, but the key mechanism, the hypometabolism, is still happening regardless of a temperature spike.
Exactly. Even when its body temperature is relatively high, its metabolic rate remains drastically reduced. This forcefully reinforces the new definition. Hypometabolism is not necessarily coupled with low body temperature. The active ability to switch off metabolic functions is the core mechanism.
Whether you're a bear regulating at 30 degrees C or a lemur fluctuating at 25 degrees C.
The mechanism is the same.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, so mammals have shown us this incredible spectrum of active metabolic control. Now, let's broaden our lens and swiftly cover how dormancy works across the rest of the animal kingdom.
Moving to birds, they're generally too costly to keep warm. Their high metabolic rate for flight makes long-term hibernation virtually impossible. Most birds just use short overnight periods of torpor.
But there's one exception.
One spectacular exception, the common porwell, the only known bird to truly hibernate. It was first observed in a state of profound torpidity in the California desert and during long periods of metabolic shutdown, an extraordinary outlier.
Now, what about the ectotherms, reptiles, and amphibians? Their dormancy, or brumation, how does that differ technically from mammalian hibernation?
For ectotherms, their winter dormancy is called brumation. Unlike mammals, they can't actively downregulate their metabolism like a switch. Their metabolic rate slows primarily because the surrounding environment is cold, and their body temperature just tracks it.
So mammals trigger the shutdown physiologically before the cold hits, whereas ectotherms trigger the behavior to find the cold, which then slows their system down.
Precisely. They rely on the environment for the temperature drop. However, some ectotherms have evolved freeze tolerance. This is a terrifying but effective mechanism.
The ability to freeze solid and revive.
They synthesize cryoprotectants, essentially internal antifreeze proteins. They manage where the ice crystals form, limiting them to the spaces outside the cells. They also dramatically increase glucose in the blood, which acts as another powerful cryoprotectant.
So they're turning themselves into a frozen biological battery pack until spring.
It's an entirely different level of survival engineering. Then we have the arthropods insects, where seasonal dormancy is called diapause. This is interesting because of its extreme evolutionary plasticity.
What makes it so adaptable?
It has a massive amount of genetic variation, which allows it to evolve quickly, often in response to climate change. The sources outline that it evolved through 3 distinct stages. First, developing neuroendocrine control over bodily functions.
So getting the machinery.
Second, pairing that control to reliable environmental cues, like decreasing photoperiods. And third, linking these controls to internal biological timers. So the insect doesn't just react. It has an internal rhythm that allows it to prepare long before hardship arrives.
And finally, fish. Most of them don't actively hibernate, do they?
Most, like the cunner, save energy simply through inactivity coupled with cold temperatures. They're still, but they don't actively depress their base metabolic rate like a hibernating mammal.
But there are exceptions.
There are. In extreme conditions like the perpetually cold Antarctic or in low-oxygen environments, some fish do suppress their metabolism. In those cases, simple inactivity isn't enough.
Fascinating. So now let's shift the focus completely, because this is where the science of hibernation connects directly to the listener's world. The implications for human medicine and deep space travel.
This is the realm of induced hypometabolism, or as it's often called, suspended animation.
And the key mechanism seems to revolve around something called HIT proteins, hibernation induction trigger. What's the history there?
HIT proteins were first isolated from the blood of hibernating groundhogs. The idea was simple. If you inject blood components from a hibernating animal into a non-hibernating one, can you induce a similar state?
And the early attempts were promising, weren't they?
Initially, yes. But translating this to human applications was challenging. A 1997 study tried to use precursors of these proteins to increase heart tissue recovery during ischemia, a lack of blood flow.
And the outcome?
They were unable to increase recovery rates for human heart tissue at that time. Isolating and safely administering a complex cocktail of molecules from animal blood just proved too difficult for large-scale human trials.
So they hit a wall. How has modern bioengineering solved this?
Modern recombinant protein technology. Instead of relying on blood extraction, scientists can now identify the specific genes for these molecules and manufacture them in the lab. We can produce specific proteins like HP20, HP25 at scale and with high purity.
So they can test single targeted compounds instead of a messy biological soup.
Exactly. This allows for precise research without the ethical and logistical constraints of animal sourcing.
So what's the immediate, profound medical application here?
The primary goal is therapeutic hypothermia, temporarily putting critically ill or severely injured patients into a state of hibernation. Imagine a trauma patient with a severe brain injury. If you can slow their metabolism, You drastically reduce their oxygen demand and slow the progression of irreversible damage.
It buys the surgical team crucial time, hours, maybe even days. It could dramatically increase survival rates in that golden hour of trauma.
It could be truly revolutionary. And of course, there's the perennial science fiction goal, making deep space travel feasible.
Human hibernation is seen as vital for missions to Mars. Why?
The benefits are enormous. If astronauts are in suspended animation, their metabolic needs plummet. They require far less food, water, and oxygen. This means smaller, lighter, safer spacecraft.
And if we tie this back to the bear's ability to prevent muscle and bone loss?
You've got it. Induced hibernation could solve two of the biggest physiological problems of long-duration space travel: bone density degradation and muscle atrophy. The lessons from a hibernating bear's genetics are directly informing astronaut countermeasures.
This idea of humans intentionally shutting down, though, it's not just modern science. You mentioned a chilling historical precedent.
Yes. A 1900 report in the British Medical Journal described a practice called Lotska among Russian peasants in Pskov. Facing severe food scarcity, entire families would adopt a state of, well, cultural hypometabolism.
What did Lotska actually entail?
They would spend 6 months essentially sleeping clustered around the stove, dramatically reducing their activity. They'd wake up once a day for a small amount of bread and water. It was a conscious behavioral strategy to reduce metabolic cost to the bare minimum.
It shows the survival pressure to slow down is latent even in human behavior.
It connects to current anthropological research, too. Scientists are studying fossil evidence to see if hibernation might have been possible in early hominids. At sites like Atapuerca in Spain, where ancestors faced extremely cold, resource-scarce periods, some form of seasonal shutdown might have been a critical survival strategy.
If that ability was in our deep past, it lends a lot of weight to the modern research trying to re-engage those genetic switches. Which brings us to the evolutionary timeline. When did this incredible mechanism become so widespread?
It's fundamentally a seasonal response. When the ancestors of birds and mammals moved from stable marine environments to dynamic terrestrial ones, they were immediately faced with intense seasonality. Hibernation, in its various forms, evolved as a crucial tool to manage those predictable pressures.
And the sources suggest it likely co-evolved right alongside endothermy itself.
Yes. The earliest suggested instance is in Thrinaxodon, a mammal ancestor from about 252 million years ago. As animals developed endothermy, the costly ability to generate internal heat, they simultaneously needed a mechanism to conserve that energy. It's thought the on-switch and the off-switch for heat regulation developed in tandem.
Okay, let's discuss the critical evolutionary constraint, size. Why do larger animals tend to lose the ability to hibernate?
This is a classic example of physics imposing an evolutionary filter: the surface area to volume ratio. Small animals have a very high surface area relative to their volume. They lose heat extremely quickly. For them, hibernation provides a massive survival advantage.
It's exponentially harder for a mouse to stay warm than a cow.
Exactly. As an animal gets bigger, that ratio decreases. It takes proportionally less energy for a large animal to maintain a high internal temperature. The energetic benefit of shutting down the whole system becomes marginal compared to the risk. The ability is often lost.
Which, again, makes the bear's ability to maintain that deep metabolic suppression despite its size such a phenomenal outlier.
It's an independent breakthrough in large mammal physiology. And we even see evidence that hibernation evolved multiple times, even within mammals, when you compare marsupials and placentals and how they develop the ability.
So let's summarize this incredible deep dive. We started by tearing up the index card that defined hibernation as simple cold sleep.
We established that it's defined by radical active metabolic suppression. Regardless of the temperature drop, we can view it as a continuous spectrum.
We learned that obligate hibernators, like the Arctic ground squirrel, maintain shocking sub-zero abdominal temperatures while still needing to perform metabolically costly periodic arousals, likely to catch up on sleep or patrol for disease.
And we saw how bears and the fat-tailed dwarf lemur shattered the old rulebook. Bears proved you don't need a massive temperature drop, and lemurs proved you don't need cold weather. Metabolic control is the sole determinant.
And crucially, this knowledge is driving critical human applications. Bioengineering these HIT proteins could revolutionize trauma medicine and make deep space missions to Mars logistically feasible.
The ability to temporarily turn off the aging and decay processes associated with a high metabolism is arguably the single greatest goal in biological research today.
It is truly a widespread, ancient, and highly adaptable survival strategy. Given that this state of controlled metabolic shutdown is so successful across so many life forms, what fundamental biological constraints are we still missing that prevent us from fully embracing human hibernation today? It leaves you wondering what ancient switch lying dormant in our own DNA we haven't quite figured out how to flip yet.
Something potent to ponder the next time you feel the need for a deep nap.
We will catch you next time for the next deep dive.